Today, we'll share with you the behind-the-scenes details of who got Trump to stand down on the trade war. Spoiler, he listened to the Wall Streeters, not the populace.
Because the stock market represents America's wealth, but the bond market represents America's power.
Yetis, we'll let that sink in for a minute. But first, President Trump is the final decider on what executive orders get his huge Sharpie-penned signature.
But he's influenced by his cabinet, by media personalities, and by CEOs.
So Jack and I are now looking at the different factions within Trump's orbit that got him to stand down this week.
We're looking at the people who got him to blink on the trade war.
So Jack, let's kick it off. Can you begin by sprinkling on some context, please?
Trump's gut has been telling him for 10 years that America is getting screwed when it comes to trade.
And he loves tariffs because they give him the ultimate unilateral power to change things in the economy without congressional approval.
Those instincts were backed up intellectually by two populist advisors.
Yes, they were.
Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon.
Navarro and Bannon, two guys who are both so loyal to Trump, they actually served prison time rather than cooperate with congressional investigations.
And both of those men believe that trade is inherently a zero-sum game.
A zero-sum game. Jack, can you explain that one for a second?
They believe, for example, if a Chinese person is making an iPhone, then that Chinese person took an American's job.
That is zero-sum. As one gets something, the other loses something.
Economists, on the other hand, think trade is a positive-sum game. We all win.
So Trump's Liberation Day tariffs that hit earlier this week, they had these two guys' fingerprints all over them.
But on the other side of the Oval Office was the techies.
Specifically, Elon Musk vocally opposed to everything those two guys were saying about the trade war.
Now, there's a couple of reasons why Elon is pro-trade. First, China holds huge sway on his business, as China could shut down Tesla's biggest, most productive factory in a snap.
Also, Jack, I thought this was an interesting point we were discussing. Elon's a workaholic, and he kind of admires that Chinese factory workers are workaholics too.
I don't think he kind of admires it. He loves the work ethic of his Chinese factory workers.
So, add it all up, and Elon opposed all those tariffs that Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro were pushing.
He even publicly insulted Peter Navarro in a back-and-forth Twitter spat all week.
We jumped in T-Boy style. The insults were flying like the Real Housewives of the White House. We thought someone was going to flip the Resolute desk.
But it wasn't Elon's opposition who got Trump to stand down and pause most of his tariffs.
No. This is what we found fascinating. It was actually two fellow New York-born financial billionaires, Bill Ackman and Jamie Dimon.
It was the two 6-foot men in finance who got Trump to stand down.
Who also have blue eyes and also have trust funds.
Of all of those who spoke out against the trade war, Ackman and Dimon caused Trump to blink.
Because Ackman and Dimon, these two New York financiers, they gave Trump some critical Wall Street perspective. And Jack, what did they tell him specifically?
They told him what was happening in the bond market.
The bond market. So Jack, what's the takeaway for all our buddies following the trade war drama?
The stock market represents America's wealth, but the bond market represents America's power.
Yetis, for 80 years, the United States dollar has been the world's reserve currency. Everyone wants it. It's in high demand.
And our U.S. government debt has been the world's financial safe haven. Everyone wants to invest in it across the world.
So those two things, Jack and I call that our financial soft power. But here's the key. Last week, investors sold more U.S. bonds than any week in 24 years.
In other words, last week was the worst week for our financial soft power in 24 years.
Yeah, listen to these examples. First, financial firms sold bonds to cover their stock losses happening all week.
Even worse, though, international investors across the world sold bonds to divest from the United States.
Deutsche Bank saw all of that and said this wild line: the market has lost faith in U.S. assets.
Bill Ackman and Jamie Dimon pointed to the falling bond market, and they told Trump that's what you should fear.
Because the stock market represents America's wealth, but the bond market represents America's power.